good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kevin Merry, and I'm the Head of Academic Development at Montfort University and an Associate Professor in Learning and Teaching as well. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Universal Design for Learning and how my institution, De Montfort, has adopted UDL as its approach to all learning, teaching, and assessment practices. So the first thing that I want to do really is just provide a little bit of background information on what UDL actually is. So at its heart, UDL is a design framework, and it's a design framework that takes into account the variable ways in which different learners engage with and approach their learning. Okay? The purpose of UDL is to support the development of learning expertise. Now, learning expertise in the context of UDL is about learners mastering content, but it's also about them actually learning how to master content in their own personalised way, because everybody will achieve learning goals in a different way. There is no one-size-fits-all. Part of supporting learners to develop that learning expertise is by providing multiple options across three key areas. So the first key area is engagement. So this is about how we get students interested in and motivated to learn, how we keep them sticking with it, and how we really stretch and challenge them. The second area is representation. This is about how we provide resources and content information for learning. So again, the idea is that we would provide multiple options in the ways in which we provide learning resources for our learners. The final aspect there is action and expression. So this is how we get students to demonstrate their understanding. So again, the idea is we provide multiple options in relation to how they demonstrate understanding. What we're saying in relation to that is assessment, of course. I don't like the word assessment because people tend to think only of summative assessment rather than the ongoing evaluations that are critical to effective learning. So I prefer to use the word evaluation. But the point still remains. It's about giving students multiple ways in which they can demonstrate that understanding. So, my institution, De Montfort University, began our UDL journey back in 2016. And the main reasons why we entered into this journey with UDL are because of the exceptional diversity among our learners. So back in 2016, 54% of our students came from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. 20% of our students were declared disabled, so obviously that doesn't include those that choose not to declare. We possess 3,000 international students from more than 130 countries, and our students possess one of the lowest UCAS points on entry profiles within the HE sector, so we know that they're exceptionally diverse. The more diverse learners are, the greater the level of learner variability, and that's one of the main reasons why we applied UDL across the institution. One of the other critical reasons, of course, was the UK government's decision to cut aspects of the disabled students' allowances. So disabled students' allowances are split into 4 bands. Bands 1 and 2 are for more low-level support, such as note takers, scribes, exam scribes, that type of thing. In 2016, the government said universities have to pay for those things themselves. So that created a rather large hole in our balance sheets to the tune of about £5.4 million. So there were both obviously, reasons associated with learning, but also financial reasons as to why we entered into this particular journey with Universal Design for Learning. We've done tons and tons of work in relation to Universal Design for Learning and getting the institution to adopt it right across the piece. I'm just going to discuss 2 of those things that we've done, 2 of those outputs, if you like, that have probably had the biggest impact in relation to that institution-wide adoption of UDL. The first one is the cheese sandwich. Sorry if anybody's feeling hungry. There's no actual food involved in this particular presentation. I wish there was, because I am a big fan of cheese. And the second one is cutlass. And I will explain what the both of those things are as we go through the remainder of the presentation. So the cheese sandwich effectively is an instructional design approach. Okay, so this is about the way that we design teaching sessions to espouse the UDL principles, all right? And it pretty much does what it says on the screen there. It's designed to support learners to become expert learners so that they can gain mastery over learning content and they can also develop their own route to mastery over that content, okay? So they can develop that learning expertise. It leverages the UDL principles alongside other common pedagogical approaches that most of us would know about. Things like constructive alignment, the use of Bloom's taxonomy, active learning, feedback, collaboration, all of these things. It's based on 5 key principles which are on the screen at the moment. So they are: students should be supported to become expert learners by achieving mastery over their learning. The role of the lecturer or teacher is to support students in developing mastery, not just deliver content. So sorry to shatter any illusions if anybody's got them out there. We're not just delivering content anymore. We've got to support student learning. That's what we're here to do. Students are more likely to master their learning in the presence of their peers and also teachers, okay? So it's easier for them to develop learning expertise if they're supported by teachers and peers. Students are more likely to master learning if they learn actively rather than passively. And students are more likely to master learning if their learning experience is customizable to their preferences. So the 3 principles of UDL: engagement, representation, and action and expression. I've mentioned mastery and mastery of content several times. In this context, mastery of content just means the ability to do all of the skills in Bloom's taxonomy. So to develop functional understanding of any given concept or topic, but particularly the higher order thinking skills, because they're obviously the most challenging that the students are required to develop as part of their learning. And this is higher education, of course, so we want them to develop those higher order thinking skills to really, really challenge them in terms of being critical, analytical, evaluative, etc. Now, what the cheese sandwich does is it places the emphasis on the time students spend with their teachers and their peers. And in that respect, it encompasses elements of flipped learning. Okay, so what's tended to happen in higher education for donkey's years is that we do all the lower order thinking skills when we give lectures and seminars, but then we expect the students to develop the higher order thinking skills for themselves during self-directed study. Now, the diversity of students we have in higher education today means that we can't be confident enough that that's going to work, that one-size-fits-all approach. So we've flipped that process around. We make sure that we use time spent with teachers and peers to work on those higher order thinking skills. And we can do the content delivery during self-directed learning. So the cheese in the sandwich is the most important part. Yeah, the most important part of any sandwich is its filling. So the cheese is the real key to this particular process, and that's the bit in orange on the screen. I picked orange because Red Leicester's orange, and I'm from Leicester, so I thought I'd keep it. Yeah, I thought I'd keep it with that. What we try and emphasise during that cheese are core important pedagogic approaches. So active learning, collaboration, mastery-oriented feedback. So we're providing students with feedback in an ongoing basis during sessions. We're not just limiting feedback to summative assessments, because without feedback, students won't learn. They won't actually improve their practice of various skills. It's mastery-oriented because it has 2 elements to it, what we call medals and what we call missions. The medals are the things that students do well, but also why they do them well, because they might not always be aware why they've done something well. And the missions, of course, are areas for development, but critically telling them how to develop, okay, so that they can develop long-term, effective learning habits and strategies as they go through. The cheese sandwich effectively works like a block of learning with those 3 phases, so pre-time spent with teachers and peers, post-time spent with teachers and peers, and then obviously the cheese in the middle. The achievement of learning outcomes spans that entire block. So we're not just limiting the achievement of learning outcomes to the teaching session itself. It can go across that entire sandwich, if you like. And of course, we utilise the UDL principles across that entire process. So we're providing multiple ways for students to engage with learning, multiple types of learning resource, and multiple ways for them to demonstrate their understanding. Okay, so we're not just giving them reading lists and written texts to study with. We're providing videos, podcasts, screencasts, links to websites, etc., etc. Now I'm going to talk about Cutlass. So please don't worry, there are no swords or knives involved in this presentation. Cutlass stands for Creating Universal Teaching, Learning and Assessment Strategies. And this is effectively a course design process to embed cheese sandwiches into the design of courses. That sounds really daft, doesn't it? Let's embed cheese sandwiches into the design of courses. I think I would sign up to any degree that actually had that as a tagline, actually. That'd be fantastic. So Cutlass really is it's a design process that program teams or even module teams can go through. So we can design courses with Cutlass, we can design modules, and we can even design individual teaching sessions. It's team-based in that it involves the key stakeholders that would be involved in the design or delivery of a course. And that's dependent upon what the course is. So, for example, if we're designing a nursing course where 50% of the students are dyslexic, we would get dyslexia specialists in the room with us when we're designing that course. If it's a course that has industry or employer engagement, we would get industry figures or the employers in the room with us when we're designing that course. We always have the students with us in the room when we're designing courses. So it's team-based in that regard. It's not just limited to the module or program team. It requires 4 stages. So there's a defining, a designing, a building, and a reviewing stage. Probably the most critical part of this particular stage is the designing stage. And one of those aspects of that designing stage is storyboarding. So you can see a picture of a storyboard on the screen there. It shows you the cheese sandwich. So we've got the pre, in, and post-session aspects of learning. When we do storyboarding, we use post-it notes. So when we used to do this face-to-face, we would actually use sticky post-it notes. But this is from Google Jamboard, which works equally as well. The orange post-it notes are the learning outcomes. The blue post-it notes are the teacher activities. The green post-it notes are the learner activities. The pink post-it notes are the resources, and the yellow post-it notes are the evaluations of learning. Now, somebody asked me the other day, actually, they said, well, why is there so many post-it notes on there? And I said, well, it's because we're providing multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. What we try to do with this particular process, particularly with the storyboarding phase, is we try and embed our student digital capabilities framework into that storyboard. So as well as learning all of the key information about the subject discipline that the students are studying, they're also upskilling their digital capabilities as well. So we try and map it to this process. We also try and map other important university initiatives to this particular process as well. So one of those is the Education for Sustainable Development. So we have an activity as part of the designing phase that gets the program team to actually decide which of the sustainable development goals are most relevant to the course that's being created and ultimately delivered. What this gives us is a blueprint. It effectively provides us with a roadmap in relation to how we can actually build universally designed courses that have all of those other important pedagogies embedded within them. So constructive alignment, learning for mastery, active learning, collaboration, all of those things. In the building phase, we literally get course teams to actually build their learning resources and learning activities there and then and embed them into the VLE. Okay, we call these digitivities. Sometimes we talk about e-tivities, but e-learning's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it now? It's all about digital education and digital learning, so we call them digitivities. And what we then do is we get the students in, or the dyslexia specialists, or the employers, or the industry figures to come and road test those learning activities and those learning resources and say, look, are these up to scratch? Do we need to change them? Are they accessible? Are they inclusive? Do they support learning in the way that we intend to support learning in this particular process? The first time we ever used Cutlass, we used it to design our in-house teacher training qualification, which is our postgraduate certificate in learning and teaching in higher education. For 3 consecutive years, it received a 100% student satisfaction score. And the learners actually said that it was easy to recognize the UDL elements of the course, and particularly which UDL elements actually supported their learning in the most effective way. We've since actually used Cutlass or elements of Cutlass to design and redesign more than 300 courses at Montfort University so far. So sometimes people might use various elements of this process. They might use the defining stage to create a blueprint, or they might use the storyboard to actually map the student learning journey through the learning. But irrespective of whether they've used the whole process or just elements of it, we're currently at about 310 courses, I think, that have been designed or redesigned as part of this particular process. So Cutlass really helps with validation, revalidation, and obviously approval of new courses as well. Our UDL story is an ongoing one. We've been at it now for about 6 years, of course. It helped us to become University of the Year for Social Inclusion in 2018, and it's also helped to narrow our disability and BAME attainment gaps. Our disability attainment gap has narrowed quite considerably. The BAME attainment gap, not so much, but we have actually affected that gap through this practice. And there's ongoing work being done as part of the decolonisation agenda to actually embed that into the Cutlass process as well. So hopefully over the next few years we could get a more significant reduction in the BAME attainment gap as well.